just want to start by thanking you all for coming. So this event is being jointly organised by the Personal Histories Department, which was founded by Pamela, and by myself as the BME officer at Trinity. So as you all probably know, this event is called, it's about personal history of colour in Cambridge. And what we intend to do and what the panellists intend to do is use the tool of oral history to explore what it means to them to be a person of colour at this university. So I'll just quickly introduce everyone, all our panellists. Actually, I'll introduce them before their personal histories. Okay. So first we have Johanna. Johanna Riha is the Policy Director for the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Global Health. She did doctoral studies in epidemiology, focusing on Uganda, and she also launched the flagship Africa Together in 2014.
Thanks. So, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I think this is a fantastic event, a much needed event actually in Cambridge. So a little bit, well, I guess I have to tell you about me. I'm not going to start my history in terms of when I arrived in Cambridge. I'm actually going to go back and tell you a bit about where I'm from. My mother is Tanzanian, and my father is Austrian, and they met in Tanzania. And growing up, we moved as a nuclear family. So me and my younger brother grew up in Sierra Leone for a while, for about 5 years. And then we moved to Mombasa, Kenya, and then from there to Ivory Coast, Abidjan. So very much an East and West African experience, which for me has greatly shaped who I am. And at around 16, I came to the UK. There was the beginning of the civil war in Ivory Coast, had to leave quite urgently due to the unrest. And actually I ended up coming here to finish up my high school degree, or whatever, high school diploma. And I stayed, and I've been in the UK since 2003. And my experience of the UK, and I think this is important in terms of where I am today, in terms of Cambridge, and how I see myself, and how that has changed and evolved over time. Because I think my Cambridge experience has been very different to my experience over the last, 10, 13 years in the UK overall. So I think when I started, I was in Birmingham, quite a diverse city, lots of Black and South Asian, a big Black and South Asian community, Caribbean. Loved my undergrad degree, which was in biological sciences. And very much connected actually there with a broad range of people, of international students, and Brummies as well. And then moved down to London to do my master's, which was in epidemiology. And there, again, I mean, London, we all know it, it's an incredible hub of diversity. And I never really thought very much about sort of color in that way. I guess growing up in a mixed race household, it was something I was always aware of. So being in, for example, visiting my grandparents in Tanzania and Moshi, people straight away knew I wasn't. I mean, I was mixed, 0.5, or in some cases even half caste. And then in Austria, clearly I'm not typical Austrian. But I only have an Austrian passport, actually. The Tanzanian government doesn't allow dual nationality, so my parents had to decide at birth, which nationality to give us, and they opted for Austrian, which again has shaped who I am, because often I'll have to explain. So, sometimes people will ask me, okay, what passport do you have? And I'll say Austrian, and they'll say, where are you really from? Trying to dig a bit deeper. So that's been quite an interesting experience, but not something that I really grew up questioning. It was something I accepted. really celebrated, loved the diversity and the fact that I was from these two very different cultures. And then I came to Cambridge, and I think Cambridge has been amazing in many ways, but I think it's really made me realize and in some ways grow closer to more of my African identity. So although I grew up, that's where I grew up, that's what I know in terms of till the age of 16 or 17 was sort of this East and West African experience. Coming to Cambridge with the lack of diversity in the university itself, I was shocked to find out that I think it's less than 1% of the student population here is from sub-Saharan Africa. So I think 200 out of 20,000 students or something. And it was actually a dinner that was hosted. Was it a dinner? It wasn't a dinner, it was a discussion group that was hosted by the Cambridge Africa program that sort of brought all of the African students together to discuss some of the issues that they've experienced sort of studying in Cambridge and getting access to the university. And I realized that actually we're so many African students here, we're often very isolated. There is the Nigerian, the Ghanaian, and recently, or very soon after that event, the East African Society was founded, but I thought what we need, and a couple of us actually discussed this, what we need is a Pan-African society to really bring us all together, that we're so few within Cambridge University. And that's sort of where the idea came to start the African Society and then create an African presence in Cambridge through the Africa Together Day, celebrating the formation of the AU. I think through that experience, and I've been involved in that day for a couple of years now, another point I realized while here in Cambridge is that it's not just about being or seeing yourself more as Black or Black African, for example, but in terms of your privilege being at Cambridge. So one thing I was really keen to push during the first Africa Together Day was this connection with Anglia-Ruskin. This is a university town, we're all here living together. And yes, within Cambridge University, there might not be that diversity, but actually in the town, there is an immense amount of diversity around of people from all over the world. And I think there's this, I'm going to say it, I think it's an elitism where Cambridge University students think they're so much better than Anglia-Ruskin students. And that's something that really hit home. And although, we can be talking about being people of color in this space that very much lacks color, actually what we need to be looking at and reflecting on is who else are we excluding and why are we excluding them? And why are we not engaging more with Anglia-Ruskin students? Why this Cambridge bubble or Cambridge University bubble? So for me, I think that's been really important. So it's not just about my experience here in Cambridge, but also how I relate to others within my community, particularly those who are of a different class, other ethnic group, other gender. I think those are all issues that are really important and have come out through my experience here. I'm going to look at my notes to see if there's other points. I think also in terms of this idea of Blackness or person of color, I guess because I hadn't really thought about it or focused on it growing up. It's still, I think it's an important concept, but I think there are limits to it. And I think, so although I haven't experienced, for example, outright racism here, I do still identify with the Black and the colored community being an other. So that's been yeah, that's been quite revealing to me, and again, not something that I had been necessarily very conscious of prior to coming to Cambridge. I think that's all. I'll stop there and then hopefully chip in as people say more.
Great, well thank you so much for sharing that. I think before we move on to Mónica, I just want to mention also that we do have another panelist coming, Suhaiymah. She got tied up in a class which is going to finish at past, so she'll be joining us as soon as she can, and she'll be our final panelist today. Okay, so we'll move on to Mónica. So Mónica Moreno Figueroa.
I put on my Facebook page today, like, I'm participating in this thing and I feel like specimen X, Y, Z, or something, and there's something I wanted to show. And I also have a bit of an issue with the person of color category, and I think that it raises a lot of things about identity and representation and who we are supposed to be and where we are supposed to be encapsulated. So maybe you want to just have a look at that while I speak. I mean, I guess I'm talking as a member of the faculty or the staff, the academic staff of this university, and that is one of the issues. Is how do I feel as an academic staff, or what is my experience? Well, I feel really lonely. I feel really lonely, and sort of pointed out, signaled out. I'm asked to represent kind of black people, when actually I feel half of my identity, or half, I don't even think of that, but halves, but I am a Mexican woman, I'm a Mexican mestiza woman. I grew up in Mexico by a mestiza mixed race woman and my mestizo mixed race stepfather. And I didn't really met any black people until I came to the UK. So this idea of blackness is something that has been put on me in a way, and that I've been researching as well, because it's been like really interesting, and I'm very interested. That's what I've dedicated. I want to dedicate my life to make racism public, and that is my job and what I want to do. But this is it raises a lot of issues for me, because I am like, well, I know people can see me as black, and then I'm like, but then there are other things about me that, I feel like my specific history, my specific story of indigenousness, of mestizo-ness, of Mexicanness, sort of gets entangled and doesn't quite make sense. So here even my Latin American world gets on the side, seems to get like, oh, that's one thing I do, then it's like the black world, that's the other thing I do, and that's quite an interesting thing to be dealing with. So what I thought I should just talk a little bit about was, what does it feel to teach, and to be teaching this, and also be the kind of the race person teaching the race class in sociology department. I mean, on the one, it's like great, I'm really happy to kind of bring students' interest and be kind of talking about these things, and I'm like, yeah, this is cool, but it is also a very heavy thing, because at the same time I feel very responsible for not being able in the everyday of my experience living here to deal with the same issues I'm teaching, and that's really hard. I was telling that I wanted to share what happened to us when we were having a meeting last week to discuss what we were going to do here. So we were in the McDonald Institute, sitting around Sogo. We were sitting there, and this woman came. She thought she could, a white woman. She thought she could just come and just said to him, "Oh, this is like a harem, right? You are surrounded by all these women," and she started laughing or something. And I was just like, "You were not there." No. And I was like, I just felt something, that something was uncomfortable. And I couldn't really, it was weird, because we just kind of were talking, we were interrupted in the middle of our meeting, although we were in this public space, but we were clearly having a discussion and a meeting, we were having a conversation. And this woman just felt she kind of had to intervene and say something. As like this unique thing is happening. Oh my God, all these black people, I have to say something. And I just felt really upset, but I didn't feel, I just felt something happened. I didn't know quite. By the end of the meeting, I turned I think to you, Lola, and I said, did something just happen there? And we're just like, And I just been keep thinking about it. And I said, well, I must talk about it, because this is what it's like. And I feel full of like, these things happen to me. I'm not even able to respond about and protect myself of these things. Where, was that racism? Was that an aggression? Was that these things that you can't, they're not always clear, you can't identify, but they are constant, and they are constant. And I always also felt like I wish I could have been firmer. I feel a responsibility towards younger people, towards the people that were to say something. I wish I could have said something and to say, what did you say? Repeat that. Did you have to interrupt? Something, you know? And I didn't have any other allies. And that is frustrating, because I teach that, I research that, I read that, I think about that every day. So this is the experience, that constant things, you know, and that is quite hard to be dealing with. There is also a lot of stuff around the racism or the microaggressions, and this, microaggressions are racism in town, right? I've been approached several times when walking in the parade, in the arcade, you know, like, oh, are you looking for a job? And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm not looking for a job. I have a job. I do have a job. Or like, oh, do you want to join our church? And, you know, by white people that want to extend these ideas of generosity that they feel they have to tell me. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. That doesn't happen to everybody all the time, or to all white people all the time. That's not like they're hitting me, they're not shouting abuse, they are not excluding me from accessing a place. But they are constantly signaling out, making an exception, bringing out that. And that happens as well when I'm calling to committees, when I'm calling to every Decolonizing Cambridge event. Oh, Mónica must have something to say, or well, I have something to say, but I can't represent, you know, I mean, so, and maybe I don't know anything about decolonizing the university education curriculum, for example. I want to learn, you know, like everybody else might want to learn. And it's also interesting, you know, to think how, for example, here, you know, we have this event that's been advertised. If you see what previously has happened in these kind of events, different peoples get attracted, and the majority of you, not all of you, which I'm really thankful to see white faces in this room, but the majority of you and us, you know, we're non-white people, that we keep talking to ourselves about these issues. And I want to see here more white people talking about white privilege, talking about the way they are racialized, and not just, again, us. And that is, and again, our young, you know, non-white students having to kind of, you know, enlighten again and say, specimen X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, again, let's tell us our story. So those things are difficult, because I want to be noticed, and at the same, I want us to be noticed, I want us to be counted, I want us to be taken care of, but we can't do that all the time. You know, even we can't do that for ourselves. So we need kind of white allies and other people to think of us, and that's hard. I was looking at the statistics about staff members, and you can see there, I mean, African Caribbean and African British is 0.2 and 0.5%, right? We have 89% of white staff. 7.9 of BME staff with non-Chinese, because the Chinese community is 3.5%, which is not much, but it's significant, as well as the Indian one. So there, I mean, even the category BME, you know, we have to break it down. It shows different stories of privilege, different stories, different experiences, different ways in which we are targeted by racism. all of the BME communities and peoples. And I'm really not aware of more than a handful of black or self-identify as black academics in the university. I had lunch with 3 of them that I knew, and they were all leaving. I'm like, don't leave. Don't go, please. We have a lot of work to do. Of course, there are lovely things that we can do, and I mean, the Black Cantabs dinner was amazing. It was just such a lovely experience to see everyone there. And that was this dinner we organized with black students from all the colleges, and it has this room with 127 people. But if you think about it, it was like 4 people per college, more or less. So, but it was so good to see us there and to be there together. However, we need to be having more discussions of other kind with our, white members of staff as well, about talking about privilege, talking about the ways that black academics are not hired and how can we get that, and what does it mean to have, a black lecturer, a black professor, and black curricula, encouraging the diversity in the curriculum and all of that. So for me it's hard, it's a bit lonely as that when I'm signaled out as black, and other times I've been feeling like I thought I came here to have this amazing opportunity to work on issues that were really important for the world. Racism is killing people, there are structural issues there. And somehow Cambridge has become another field site. And I didn't come here to do research on Cambridge. That I thought, I came here to flourish, to impact the world, to just become, oh wow, I was like, oh my God. I was like, no, because I've been asked by my own colleagues, when are you going back to your country? I'm just like, in my college, I'm like, oh, wait. I thought we were over those kinds of things. So coming from, I was before in Newcastle and before that in Nottingham, and I studied at Goldsmiths. So I've been 16, 17 years in this country. And I was always in these sociology departments where I really felt very welcome, very allowed. It has been a shock for me to come to Cambridge and suddenly be sort of exposed in a way, or open, not anymore in my maybe protected, more environment of sociologists. Not that they're all amazing, critical, but I did feel more or less always quite reasonably protected, I have to say. And here is like, it's different. It is different because not all of our academics are, clued into what is appropriate even to say, Some people say to me like, oh, what does it feel to be a colored person? And I'm like, what? What century you're on? Things like that. And they're just like constant. And it's not that I want to do a moaning thing, but you asked me to tell my personal history, of color. So it's just unavoidable, right? To come to those places. And for me, it's like, I've been asked, and I've been seen, and I realized I've been asked to step on this role of blackness and take on this identity. And so, for example, one student, Camogelo from medicine, she lovingly offered to do my hair. It's the first time I've done these braids, so I'm just so fascinated. And it's because I grew up in Mexico. My mom just cut my hair really short because she just couldn't deal with it. And I'm like so happy. I love it. I'm just like, how did I reach 44 without doing my hair like this? It's like, okay, this is, all colors. Just wait. It's gonna happen. I'm just gonna keep doing this. And I'm really excited to be able to share this and learn other aspects of, what I could do and I could be and I could enjoy of my body, of my hair, of, all the things that have to do with this specificity, that is not allowed sometimes in the visual things we're exposed to in the media, etc. But yeah, it's been quite an experience, so I'm very thankful too. I have brilliant students. I have, been really excited always to engage with them. So the students are always, it's been really loving to work here. But it is in those contradictions. It's not easy, it's in that tension. And I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hello everyone. When I was asked to do this, I was a bit confused because I'm only 20 years old, so I was like, I haven't been alive for that long, so I don't know if my history is going to be that interesting. But I think it's really important in the context of this event, especially because it's about tracing histories that haven't been platformed in a place like this. So thank you for putting this on. Just to start at the beginning, I guess, I would say that I'm children of Nigerian immigrants. I'm 20, I'm an English student, I go to Selwyn, and I think before I came to Cambridge, because I live in an inner city area that's quite diverse. I live in a place called Edmonton in North London, and I went to a school that was very, very diverse in terms of ethnicity. I'd never really been asked to think critically about race because I had this idea of when I was in school, I didn't think that anything existed outside of my school because I was so invested in the school community. I was head girl, I had lots of responsibilities, and so I never really thought about race outside of a kind of vague understanding of obviously history, and an understanding that I might be less desirable, less easier to approach, or it might be harder for me to get a job because of what I looked like. I think I've always had ideas and opinions, and I've always been able to articulate them in certain ways, and I think the culmination of what I've come to be or who I am or what my beliefs are now comes from one, finding out about feminism when I was in year 10 in sociology, and coming to Cambridge. So I remember when I got my offer, not many people from my school came to Cambridge, so there was a lot riding on it. There was a lot of pressure. There was this pressure of representation, but also I think a pressure I put on myself because Cambridge is always framed as a mark of distinction, which is strange to me, and it was strange then and it's strange now. And also I think, particularly being an English student, people always assumed that I was coming to do law or medicine, because the framing and understanding of what the subjects that Black people can take and are the subjects that they're interested in is very kind of small. We're always put into a kind of niche corner. And so where I live, strangely enough, I started to see links with Cambridge because where I live is where Keats was born and where he lives, and now it's virtually unrecognisable. Keats wouldn't know what was happening in the place that he was born now. He'd be very confused. So I thought those links were really interesting as well. I think when I got to Cambridge, despite all of these things that I was resisting, the scope of what I imagined for myself did open up, and the opportunities that were presented to me were a lot more than where I came from. And some of my first memories of this place are about posturing and also code switching, and recognizing very quickly that there were people who were very different to me, and that I was in some ways very much outside of what was happening. There was a kind of shared cultural capital that was assumed, I think, is assumed in every subject that I sometimes felt locked out of because I didn't understand references, or I didn't get this, or hadn't read this, or and so that kind of solidified the idea of being an outsider and not really understanding. But it also, I think what happened when I came here was that my identity automatically became more political, and so where I hadn't really felt the need to kind of but really investigate what it means to be black in a space, or find people who look like me and discuss the effects of racism or the effects of microaggressions or those kinds of small things. The second I got here, I was like, this is something that's very necessary. And I think early on I realised what I cared about. I realised that that was the thing that was important to me. And so that was the thing that I pursued more than, academic study, the conversations that I'd had with people, the experiences that I put on the events that we held, stuff like that. It was in those spaces that I recognised that there is a really important legacy that students of colour need to leave behind, or that our presence is actually really important, and that we have things to say that haven't actually been said before, and we can say them in different forms, whether that means it through like kind of small acts of resistance, I think. So that can be from, refusing to write your dissertation on Auden and choosing to do it on contemporary poets in black contemporary poets in inner city London, or writing an essay on a woman, or bringing in theorists and critiques that aren't necessarily used because they're not deemed acceptable by a specific academic framework. I think another thing that happened when I got here was that I was looking quite a lot for outlets for this kind of frustration that I had, because I came here as someone who cared quite deeply about these issues, and I saw that people were struggling and nobody ever said anything. So I was always the person who was like arguing with people, and it was always very exhausting because you're put in the position of being of an educative position. You have to teach people things that they didn't know before, and a lot of people would say to me, wow, I never thought about it in this way, or you're the first kind of black person that I've ever met, or it's just small things which when you frame your personhood as something that you have to constantly defend, it can become quite tiring. And so I remember a quite distinctive moment where I realised that I could just be. I didn't have to be necessarily anybody's teacher. I could, go out with my friends. I could have picnics. I could just enjoy myself. And that's when I started, I think, to cultivate spaces that platform the voices of BME students. So as the facilitator of FLY, we hold weekly kind of meetings where women of colour can come together and kind of discuss some of the issues that they might have, some of the feelings of isolation, some of the feelings of alienation, some of the feelings of not being desirable, not feeling smart enough, posturing, all of the things that everybody kind of knows happens but doesn't really speak about. And one of the great joys of being here actually has been being in those meetings weekly and seeing the events that we hold, and seeing people rail, seeing people cry, seeing people laugh, seeing people really be able to finally relax into themselves, because being here in an 8-week period is quite stressful, and then if you put on top of that all of the microaggressions, all of the little comments, all of the kind of ideas you might have about how other people perceive you, it can be quite stressful. And so to have those spaces where people could say things out loud, I remember one particularly, last time we held a kind of it was called Fly Host Men of Colour, which was basically men and women of colour around Cambridge. We all came and gathered in the SU and had this massive discussion about what it means to be here, and is it our obligation to leave things behind? Should we? Can we? What do we do? How do we feel if we're tired? All of that kind of stuff. And it was such a joyous and life-affirming experience, because now I'm realising, because of the year that's coming up below me, that my time is coming to an end, and so all of the work that I've done has to be carried on. There needs to be structures in place so that other people can feel that they're not alone. I think the battling of loneliness is something that I've tried really hard in everything I've done to kind of combat, because the idea that there's someone sitting in their college not able to talk about all of these feelings really upsets me, because it's that kind of isolation that leads to more harmful things, I think. So just on that, just more ideas about so when I got here, I kind of started writing about a lot of these frustrations, and one of the things that was so again life affirming was people emailing me or messaging me or saying, oh God, you said this thing, so you feel it too, this is a thing that is happening and we're allowed to say it, and what is it, how do we make it better, how do you protect yourself against it, how have you coped with it, and a lot of, I think, being here has been about community. For me, has been about community, and it's been about coping, and it's been about, okay, making sure there are mechanisms in place so that people feel like they have the help that they need, even if they don't feel like they need it. Because I've also spoken to a lot of students who don't feel the same anxieties and are people of colour, and that's absolutely fine, because you know, there are a variety of ways to be a non-white person. We're not all the same. But what I did want to do was make sure that there were places where people could speak. Yeah, so just lately in general, now that I guess my time's coming to an end and I'm feeling a bit more reflective, I've been thinking about legacy and what it is exactly that we are leaving behind. And in last year I did something called the Fly Girls Guide to Cambridge, which was just a compilation of little tips and advice and funny things that people had said about Cambridge and ways that they had navigated it. And that was something that we put online. We have the Fly blog, which is a place where people can post articles and stuff. And those things have, I think, been really formative and really helpful. And so alongside that, it's also really nice to know that I now know, you know, BME people who are going to be, you know, artists and directors and are going to do loads of really important things. And again, I think that's the thing that's been most critical to me. And outside of, you know, the alienation that I might sometimes feel from an institution that doesn't recognise the work of unpaid student activists or people who care about things, because a lot of the things that students do are unpaid. When I was campaigning to get a BME officer in my college, that took up a lot of my time, and that was unpaid. When we did the petition against David Starkey, that took up a lot of the time, and that was unpaid. All of the kind of BME access events that happen in specific colleges are put together by students who sacrifice their time and are never kind of repaid in any kind of way. And so those are the things that I think are important, and those are the things that I'd like to emphasise. Yeah, and I say this because the more that I am critical, the more that we change it, the more that we mould it into a shape that we want it to be, the more that we're clawing back spaces of ownership. And I think ownership and belonging is really important, and that's the reason why I do it. I think.
Thank you. I remember seeing actually the Fly Girls Guide to Cambridge before I came here. So our next panelist is Sogo. Sogo Akintaro is a current undergraduate student as well. He's involved in SOAR, which is Cambridge's BME Men's Network. He also co-founded Limitless, which creates a platform for youth in London state schools.
So, thank you all for coming again. So my name is Sogo, as you all have heard, and if you can tell, my name is Nigerian, so my full name for you guys is a special, Oluwasogo. And I'm saying this because in order to sort of explain my experience at Cambridge, and actually to even take this even further, just in my experience as a black male in life so far, and because Cambridge has just represented about 3 years of my life so far, I felt that it's important to sort of take in the journey as to the 3 main parts of my life whereby race really came up, and it was something of interest in how that's shaped me in who I am right now. So I was born in Nigeria, and I lived there for the first 6 years of my life. My family moved over to London, southeast London, Peckham, and moving over to the UK was quite challenging for me, just because the 2 things which were sort of part of my identity, what I knew as myself, were being challenged immediately. And so in primary school, it started from primary school, whereby the tone of my skin and my voice were 2 immediate things whereby students at that young age already started to engage with and to sort of make fun of. So students already made fun of how dark your skin was, and this was interesting coming from students who are also black themselves, and they took sort of justification in being a bit lighter than you are, and because you're dark skinned, that's something which isn't desired. But it's something which you still see in society today, and something which is still being perpetuated amongst time. And that sort of early experience, it started to sort of show me that started to sort of indicate my identity. And I wasn't just a black male, I was a Nigerian. I was a Nigerian immigrant in the UK. And so that was sort of my first experience of race, and that's me being aware that I was a bit of an outsider. And over time, I guess as I grew up, I tried to adjust and mold into what you see around you and try to just fit in. And growing up as a black male in South London was also a unique and interesting experience, because at the time when I was growing up, you had racial profiling and what was gang wars and postcode wars is in that sort of time and period. And so what I was surrounded by was, I guess I started to learn a bit about myself and look around myself and see how I was being perceived. So being stopped and searched a few times, it was something which was natural, which I sort of started to deal with and just understand that, just thought it was a way of life. But what that sort of meant to me was that my identity, the way I looked to other people, was an issue and something which was being dealt with. And so after a few incidences whereby there were cases of mistaken identity and whatnot, I started to sort of change my appearance. So I started to go out in polo shirts, make sure I had a shirt, and make sure the colour of the clothes I was wearing wasn't too dark, so it wasn't mistaken for a gang or whatever, or that I was being aggressive. And so these sort of experiences started to sort of shape how I viewed myself and how the world viewed me. The second part of my life whereby race really came into perspective and was really blazing for me was when I was deciding what sixth form I should go to. So I got into a private school which my mum didn't really want me to go to because she was uncomfortable with the area. So there were a few incidences of racial harassment in that area whereby my mum just wasn't comfortable with me going into that area because it wasn't even very diverse. I got into another private school which was more close to my house, but my teacher advised against it because she said it's not very diverse and you probably won't fit in. You go to somewhere where you feel a bit more comfortable. Despite that advice, I still went to that private school, and I essentially went from a school which was about predominantly 80-90% black to there being 2 black guys in my year. And so it was a change of environment, but I didn't really mind. I just thought I'd go in, do well, get my grades, get out, and it just wasn't an issue for me. I just got on with things and I just tried to integrate. But it was only when my mom came in on parents' evening, when she looked around and she was used to being surrounded by other ethnic minorities, and she realised she was the only black person in that space as well. And she pointed it out to me and I said, oh yeah, I didn't realise. It was just because it was, when you view the world, you view it from an external, you view it from your internal perspective and just see everyone else. You don't see yourself, you don't see how other people view you. And then I started to realise that I stood out. And that sort of made me feel a bit more like an outsider. There was one experience whereby I was coming back from lunch with 2 of my friends, and we walked past this gate. You need to swipe your card to enter, and we were walking down, and there was this security guard who came chasing after us and asked me to show my card specifically, bearing in mind the 2 people that were with me, one was white, one was Bengali, and he just wanted to see my card to prove that I went to that private school, to prove that I went to the school. And at that moment, I wasn't sure what that was. I wasn't sure whether it was racism, maybe he was just confused about, maybe he hasn't seen me because I was new at the school and these things. And although I didn't make any fuss, I showed my card and I just went about my day. But that experience also confirmed and reinforced that view that I was different, that I stood out, and it sort of reintroduced that idea of the way that people viewed me, not the way I viewed the world. That was something that was particularly evident with that experience. But moving on, I guess the third stage of my life where my race really came into prominence again was Cambridge. And Cambridge has been great, but there have been a few incidences whereby you're in the environment and a few comments are just said here and there. So I'll take you to one time when I was in my friend's kitchen. We're having dinner, just chilling. He brought about loads of his friends, and I was just trying to chill, relax. And essentially, we were just playing some music. We were playing some rap music. And then there was this girl who was just rapping along to the words. She knew all the words and whatnot. And this guy, who I'd just known for 20 minutes, turned to me. Bear in mind she was white. He turned to me and said, "Oh look, she's more gangster than you are." I turned to him and I looked at my friend, because I've had conversations with him about these things in the past, and his face was just saying, "Don't do it." And I controlled myself. I didn't say anything, and I was really frustrated. And the reason I didn't say anything was because moments in the past when we've had these conversations, there've been numerous encounters. That's why Cambridge has been interesting, because I haven't had those sort of encounters before. And the reason it's interesting because those encounters in the past, people criticised me for being too sensitive to that I was just joking, that it wasn't an issue, I should just move on and whatnot. And in that moment in time, I felt that if I spoke up, if I started laying into him, that would just ruin the dynamic, or just ruin the dinner. It would be like I ruined that dinner which he organised for all of his friends, and so I just kept quiet, and I was just really frustrated about that. And it was just because I felt like I was outnumbered, and so it was just nothing I just had to move on with it. And it was something which is just remains in your mind for a long time. You just think, how could I respond to that differently? How should I have addressed that? Should I have stood out? Should I have called him out and whatnot? And it sort of brings back this feeling when you are in a space like this, you feel like you are a representative, like you're meant to represent the black people of the world, and you're meant to sort of try to you're meant to speak on behalf of all issues, even though you might not know it, but it's related to black culture, so you must know it and whatnot. And so secondly, I guess, was a pretty bad time for me, because I started to internalize all these things, and I started to, I guess, preempt certain decisions, other people's interactions with me. And I started, so it'll be times at night when I'm walking out, I'll take down my hood when I'm if I see someone is in front of me, I'll just take it down, just because I don't want them to be scared or anything like that, or I'll cross the road, or things like that, which were quite unproductive and quite annoying. But I started to internalize all of those sort of feelings and just brought it apart on myself. But I'll say the turning point was really when you start spending time with more people of colour. So you really involved with ACS, you're involved with other BME groups, and in those sort of groups you feel like I'm not the only one. You feel like other people have had those sort of experiences. You could share those experiences, you could joke about it, you could laugh, you could just relax, you could be yourself. You don't have to worry about race, because everyone else is of the same colour, and it's not an issue that will come up. It's not something that you're categorised at. And what's interesting was that, I guess, when you start forming those friendships and you start doing things out and about, you're just out, just trying to have a good time. It's funny that some people will come back and just view, is this a ACS meeting? Is this a VME meeting? It's like, no, it's just a group of friends. It's the labeling. It's just, that's the frustrating thing. It's that, although, and it goes back to the sixth form sort of experience, it's although I view the world and I'm just trying to live, just be me, it always comes back to race. There's always someone that labels, I'm being labelled because I'm black, and I can't, and it's one of those things whereby right now, the way I've sort of started to just deal with it is just I just started to embrace my blackness and just embrace who I am and just be me. Don't try to prejudge or preempt what people are going to do. It's just live your life and just don't worry about those people who what they say or how they might try to interact with you. Just be you. And I think that's what I've learned throughout this process throughout my life so far. And I guess that's the sort of message that I would want to give to any youngsters who are also having a similar experience. And essentially this is just to like give you a bit of an insight to how my experience in life and in Cambridge has been.
Thank you. So our next panelist is Njoki. Njoki Wamai is a scholar and activist. She's pursuing doctoral studies in transitional justice in post-election Kenya. She's also co-founder of the Black Kantap Society.
Yes, my name is Njoki. A Kenyan. I mean, many identities, a Kenyan, an African. But in Cambridge, I think I'm just a black student. I keep saying that I became black in Cambridge. Yeah, because I came here as this like fire-eating activist from having worked as an activist. So maybe my background in Kenya, I lived in Kenya for you know, I did my university. My parents live in Kenya. I was at the University of Nairobi. Worked in Kenya as an activist for 4 years. But as an activist dealing with human rights and exclusion, and then I came and I got a scholarship at the Africa Leadership Center at King's College London. So I was quite insulated, even if I lived in London. I was in a center that was led by a very my mentor, who is Dr. Fumi Olonisha-King, who is a Nigerian British professor, who very activist, very sensitive to exclusion, and also working on this decolonizing, say, the academy as maybe what I'm interested in now. So I was quite politicized in that way by the time I left London. And then London, of course, I mean, everybody's in London. So race then was not that a big deal for me. And I came to Cambridge. So very naive, very excited, very happy, like, you know, I'm going to Cambridge. Everybody was so excited. Yeah. And then here I am in Cambridge, and I remember coming here the first week with the same naivety and energy of, you know, I'm in Cambridge. I mean, everybody at home, my center, the Africa Leadership Center, and they're new, the one export to Cambridge. So it means they're doing something good. Because they train young Africans on peace and security. And I came to Cambridge and I got the Gates Scholarship, the most prestigious graduate scholarship. So it was a very exciting month. But then during that month, I remember during the orientation, we were in a group with some other colleagues at my department, politics department, and they're asking, so who got the Gates Scholarship? And they're looking around themselves. And I'm like, it's me. And someone looks at me, oh, you. And, you know, like, whatever, you, let's go on with our conversation, you know. And suddenly, the excitement started wearing off, you know. And then I remember we went for a pub quiz with some mates, and I answered 2 questions. I mean, these are people, it's still orientation, you're still trying to get to know each other. And these guys, and I answered some 2 questions, and some like, really, you? So I started getting surprised at how people expected so little from me. And yet I came from a place where, you know, I was considered really something. so it was so shocking to be in a space where people really don't expect nothing. Yeah. And it was quite distressing, because over and over these little things replayed themselves, and I could see people don't expect, oh, you know, and I would say something, or I would say, oh, you know, these African scholars in my course have done this already, and like, whatever, it's like, you didn't speak. So no one was affirming me, whether it's the spaces I was in, especially within my department, or my colleagues, and these are people, say, I hung around people who were doing African studies together. So it was quite distressing and a bit shocking, because I was coming from a very safe space, a space where, you know, people were already emancipating and decolonizing themselves, who are saying we need to say Africans on the curriculum, where when you spoke, you are affirmed. Someone would say, oh, Suhaiymah has said that. Not you speak, and someone like, oh, did she speak? Oh, God, she can't speak. Oh, and then someone else is like, let's go on. And just not knowing those codes as Lola, my dear, was saying here, not knowing those codes that, oh, this, I don't fit in, and I started feeling like I don't fit in. And so for me, it was quite surprising, and it took me quite some time to realize, oh my God, these people are projecting their insecurities on me, the insecurities of seeing a black body next to them in Cambridge, you know, and it was quite disturbing, because I don't know what I had I had this image of Cambridge as this place. A very wrong image of what I thought Cambridge was, I might say. You know, where, you know, it's the center of excellence. I thought it was diverse. I mean, I'm not sure I thought it was diverse, but I thought at least there was diversity in thought. Everyone was accepted. When you got there, you could be, and there was a space for you. But it was quite disturbing. And it left, I think, a scar. And it politicized me in a way, not in the activists where I was in Kenya as a neoliberal activist, but it started politicizing me about race and critical race issues, which I had never thought about, because I was a Kenyan in Kenya. I was an African in London, or a black person moving around in a very safe space. But through Cambridge, I became so painfully aware, because it was a very painful process when you go to these places and no one expects anything. Or when you speak, they're like, whatever. Or, oh, she's intelligent. Oh, she can say something. So that for me is disturbing, and that's why I think because I came to Cambridge already in my 30s, so I didn't expect. I came here, I thought, you know, I'm just an old woman. I'm just going to do my PhD and get the hell out of here. I was not interested in doing activism. I was not interested in any student events. But then I realized, I mean, if I don't do something, who will? Yeah, if I don't step up, I don't want the next person to come and face the same issues that I have. And so I became an activist. It was not quite a plan, but somehow I started. And the first thing I started organizing, I think even a Black History Month at the gates, we need, you know, to talk about black students. I contacted Pauline, I think, so that meeting that Johanna was talking about came about. We need to organize African students. How do we all come together? And then we co-founded that African Society with other colleagues also. But even with that, it was not enough just to be organizing as Africans, because when you walk into King's and maybe the what do you call it, the porter says tourists are not allowed today, they don't see you as a Kenyan, an African. They just see a black face, you know, who they're not aware, or they don't expect many of us to be here. So for me, it was also, that's how we came about, and that blackness, and seeing myself as a black person. And the more reason that black students, I think in Cambridge, we need to get together, you know, with these many divisions. Yes, they're important, and there's important in the variety and to do our own activities, but we must come together. Part of the reason the US universities have been successful in pushing their agenda is because they have a Black Students' Union that comes together, and once they speak, then even the Vice Chancellor can listen. So we need whether we need to find a way where we come together as black students and we can be heard. When we started the Black Cantab Society, it was more because about research, because there are so many black students, black people who've been to Cambridge. And what happened? They did not speak out. Or they did, but we don't know what, their legacy is not there. And so everybody every year comes in, they face the same microaggressions, they face the same discrimination. And black students, by the way, perform, not black, BME, the whole group, performs the worst in Cambridge. Yeah, we are the worst performing. Why? Because half the time we are spending time fighting battles that we are not supposed to be fighting. We are supposed to be thriving, as Mónica said. We are supposed to be enjoying ourselves. That's what I thought I came to do. But even emotionally, oh God, it's been draining. Because half the time I'm spending my time fighting battles that I never thought I came to fight. I thought I would just be here, do my course, enjoy Cambridge, because this is it's first a very beautiful town and a very rich institution that we should be able to really thrive, because there are so many resources. But how can we thrive if psychologically you're damaged or because of the space? So I think for me, these colleges need to do something. They need to stop ignoring and the institution as itself, because even all the activist work is students who are still doing it. Fly, thank God for Fly, the space for black women. Shogo, thank you. There's a space for black men. I feel so bad for black men in Cambridge, because black guys, all men, most men, you don't talk. You just assume, you just go and then assume, things are cool. So it's so good that, thank you for that space. And for black men more, it's so bad. He has to put down his hood. It's so sad. Even changing your dress, and so many African black men, everybody. One of my friends was telling me the same thing. I was asking him, you are a student, a friend of ours is Chaka. Why do you have to wear a suit, like a nice, what do you call them? Like chinos and a nice shirt every day, and it's winter. He's like, no way, I can't afford to dress in, jeans and hoods, because everybody will not stop taking me seriously, or it's so unfair, or they'll think, not taking me seriously, they'll think I'm a thug. And it's in Cambridge. So it's so much work needs to be done, and especially in terms of that legacy. How do we make this, because students come and go, who needs to do more? And I'm glad we have academics here. White students, no one is talking to white students. So we meet, every day we meet and mourn, decolonize Cambridge. We are meeting as BME students, we mourn. Black cantabs, we meet and mourn. Yes, it's important to mourn. Grief is so important, grief in sessions. But structurally, how do we change this? Who is talking to white students because of these microaggressions to make our lives better? And we need, and I thank God for the few who are here, for these allies. But it's good to have courses like what Mónica is doing with the risk cluster and her courses. At least they come in as, we want to study, and then they're challenged. But at a greater level, because this will continue, and it's so wrong. If I came to thrive here, let me thrive. Yeah, if I should have gotten an A, I should get it, not a B because I was busy running events. Of course, running events is important, but mourning and psychologically just being messed up because I'm not happy. Anyway, it's not that bad. But I'm just about to finish my PhD and I'm leaving Cambridge, and I'm excited. I'm as much as I feel a bit damaged, but a bit of me also feels very excited because of the legacy that, especially this group of people I can see that we have left that was not there. Whether it's Fly, the African Society, the Black Cantabs, and all those spaces and now there's this space for black men, and the many other BME spaces that I have seen through, which were not there when I joined Cambridge in 2012, or which had died probably, because that's the other thing, they come in and die. So how do even institutions like Cambridge, Africa, help them continue? Maybe when the new students come, how do we talk to them and tell them, expect this kind of microaggressions? But also, how do we get the other white students, the people in privilege? Because the problem with Cambridge is this privilege and being forced, you getting into a space of privilege and being forced to conform these codes that we are talking about. You're either forced to conform, and when you don't conform, then it's like there's a sanction, you're not cool enough. And I can imagine for younger people, it's not a nice process. But also, how do we get people to know it's okay to be? And how does Cambridge then use my diversity to make it a better place? Because it's not using it. It's making me look like there's something wrong with me. And so I have to conform and, become snotty, speak a different accent to be accepted, which is okay, but still, I think, and that's why our diverse spaces are good, because everybody brings in their diversity and they are let to be, and it kind of enriches the place. So for me, that's the Cambridge I hope that we can get one day, but I hope that especially the academics, the white students, and the institution can take this on board and do something about it. Otherwise, it's not fair for BME students to be drained, sacrificing. They're here to thrive. We're here to just be students. Thank you.
So Suhaiymah is going to be our final panelist. After Suhaiymah speaks, we'll have an opportunity to have a kind of discussion. So the discussion will happen with the panelists, among the panelists, and with the audience. So if there's anything that you feel like a question you want to ask or a comment you'd like to make, then obviously you can do that. We have a few minutes for that. Just to be mindful that the very nature of this event is a platform for these people to come and to give their personal history, and that's a brave act in and of itself, especially in a space like this. So I think keeping that in mind with the questions that you ask and the comments that you make is really important. This isn't a space to question anyone's identity or their experience, but to kind of further what we've already been talking about now. So Suhaiymah. Suhaiymah Manzoor-Khan is a current undergraduate student as well. She is an activist. She's involved in Cambridge's BME campaign and FLAG, and she writes on race, gender, and the intersectionality of these on her blog.
Thank you. I just say sorry for missing the start as well and what you said, and it's been really nice to hear everyone. And actually, I think what I will say, you will see kind of echoes similar themes, I think, from other people's experiences, but is different. So yeah, I'm Suhaiymah. I'm currently third year studying history here at Queen's. I'm from Leeds. My parents were children when they migrated from Pakistan to West Yorkshire. Yeah, that's the context. So I just made some notes on my phone, so when I'm looking down, that's all I'm doing. Yeah, I think this is really nice to be able to think about what it means to be a person of colour at Cambridge. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to say, at first, I was thinking a lot of heavy things, and I was thinking loneliness and alienation and all that kind of trauma and the microaggressions. And then I was thinking, actually, I don't feel so much that way anymore, and actually what's changed is just that I've met a lot more people who have had similar experiences, and that makes a really big difference. So anyway, to start, I guess I'll say that when I'm considering what it means to be a person of colour at Cambridge, for me that's also bound up with kind of realising I was a person of colour at all. And by that I just mean I went to a state school in Leeds, which was really ethnically diverse, and I guess that meant that I could never be distinguished for being a brown girl who wears a headscarf. That wasn't, you wouldn't have been able to tell who I was if you said that's how you define me. So that wasn't who I was just a person. But as soon as I came here, for two reasons. One being I was the only person that I could see around that looked like, in my college at least, that looked like me, and everybody else, nearly everybody else, was white. And the second thing being that I think it being quite important that people hadn't met someone who looked like me in real life before. And so those two things, which were kind of completely outside of my control, really like shaped my experience. And I think it's difficult when you're like 18 years old and you just come to this place and, like you say, you're full of excitement and you're thinking this is going to be amazing. And just all those initial interactions, I think in Freshers Week especially, when you're trying to make friends, I remember just having this sort of moment where I realised that, oh, okay, so the way that I'm seeing everybody, like you said, like you're inside your head when you're looking out and you don't realise, and the first thing that everybody else was seeing was, you know, this headscarf and the skin, and that was it. And obviously, so it meant every interaction I had to go through kind of overcoming all these assumptions first, and, you know, it's like a silent conversation that you have to go through first and say, oh no, yeah, I can speak English. Oh no, yeah, like I do have sense of humour. Oh no, yeah, like and all these kind of things. And then you can kind of, you know, once you've retrieved your humanity in that way, then you can go on. And that's a lot to expect for someone in Freshers Week to do, I think. But so yeah, that was kind of hard, and it didn't really change in the sense that I think some people, you know, just don't get past that. And there's this girl in my college who, she really, all we can talk about is, and it's stuff that I don't even know about. So she'll just be like, oh, there's a really like beautiful Arabic calligraphy shop in Cambridge. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, no, that's actually quite difficult. So this kind of, I think it comes down to the fact that this is like a burden of being, you know, if you are the only example of something in that space, then you become the example, right? And I think at a time, especially over the last few years, it's been interesting just in terms of, you know, political things happening, in terms of Islam, in terms of Islamophobia and all of this, and getting involved in conversations in college or with friends or whatever. I think at first especially I was always aware of kind of treading the line of, well, I don't want to say what people expect me to say, but I also don't want them to just have a conversation without me. And I don't know why that's so difficult, but it is difficult because you don't want to be the generalization that people have. But I think the burden is essentially that, you know, when people go home and they're talking with their families at the dinner table, right? And it comes up about Islam, someone's going to go, oh no, but I know this one Muslim girl, and that's you. So everything that you do, you're suddenly, you know, you're in people's dinner tables everywhere. I think that kind of thing is really difficult because it means it's quite constraining on what you do. And I mean, yeah, there's the argument that it shouldn't constrain what you do, and I like to think it doesn't, but, you know, every now and then it's kind of like, actually, you know, if you are the one example, then that's a lot to carry, and that's a lot to do alongside doing your degree and alongside not knowing what you think about a lot of things and trying to formulate your opinions about things. And it often means that you don't have a lot of opportunity to change your mind, because, you know, if you're asked something on the spot, it's like you've got to know what you're going to say. And that's not really, I think it's a privilege to be able to change your mind sometimes, and it's something that we're not really afforded as people of colour, students of colour. So yeah, something I just was thinking about as well when I wrote this was that something particularly interesting about, I think, wearing a headscarf, especially in this space, was that I think like femininity in Cambridge specifically is, you know, really, really white. It's not just white, it's really white. And I remember feeling for a long time that I could never be one of the girls. I could never sort of, I just felt like I could never access this sort of circle, this kind of socializing. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know why. And obviously I thought it was my fault, you know, I don't have the right sense of humour, I don't know, I'm not having the right conversations, there's something going on. But after a time I realised, no, it is just that, you know, when people see me or when I interact with them, it's just kind of uncomfortable because there's too many assumptions about socialising and how I'm going to do it and how it works. And yeah, I don't know, I think that's just something that still I kind of wonder about, and I wonder about how that shaped my experiences. And I think that's why kind of finding Fly, which is the Women of Colour network, made a huge difference. It was the first time where I could talk to people and say things, and they knew and they understood and they agreed, and I think that makes a really big difference. But before I jump ahead to that, I think it's important to kind of say that I think there's two ways of kind of surviving in a space like this as a person of colour, and I think kind of we've all evidenced maybe different ways of doing both of those at different times in our lives. And I think one is the tack that I took in my first year, which was that I hate this feeling of standing out. I hate this feeling. I realised, oh, I'm trying to fit in, but that's not how you get into a place. People have to let you in. You can't just keep kind of trying to change yourself. So I guess, yeah, at the end of the day, that's where I decided that I wanted to say, I would address head on those things instead. And I think that's why Fly was so important. So I, went to this meeting, and it was just in this coffee shop, and there was just 2 or 3 girls there. But it was amazing the extent to which these people understood what I was saying, compared to just, my white friends at college who, I love and get along with, but it was like there were aspects of my humanity that they had never been able to acknowledge or even understand. And that's something that is still really difficult to explain to them. And I remember coming back from that meeting and telling them, like, oh my gosh, this amazing thing happened. And no one really getting it and getting why it was amazing. But yeah, I think then it was kind of about me saying, actually, sorry guys, I know I pretended that I wasn't, but I am brown and I am wearing headscarf. And so I began to write a lot, actually, and the Fly blog was a really great way into that. And then I have my own blog now, and I think for me that's just a way of forcing people to kind of, I think my main worry was that by not saying anything, I was allowing myself to become the exception to people's assumptions and generalizations about Muslim women, right? And that they would say things like, oh yeah, but you're not really like the rest. And so actually, even when they have those conversations at the dinner table at home, and they refer to me as the Muslim woman, it's like, yeah, but no, but she's not really like the other ones. And I was like, no, hang on, I am. I'm like every single other brown person that you denigrate or whatever, that is me as well. So for me, it was important to say I'm not going to let myself be the exception. So that's why I wanted to write those things and have those conversations to kind of say to people, sorry, we're not going to get past this. Let me just see what I've written here. So, yeah, I think what it means then being here in this space and then kind of moving forward and being a person of colour. So I recently did my dissertation, and that just got me thinking about, what has it meant to be a person of colour here. And so I do history, and Cambridge has sorry, I'm trying to word this right, the best history department in the world, right? But something that I kind of noticed when I was doing it was that, this history was none of it had anything to do with me, really. None of it, I was never finding out about myself or my story or how I was here or anything. And even when I did, there's like a paper on the world. And when I did that as well, it was like, oh, you mean British Empire, right? Sorry, I thought we were, okay, cool. So it was all a bit warped, but yeah, and that's why I've been really interested in, decolonising education and curriculum and that kind of thing. But anyway, so kind of thinking in terms of what it meant to be a person of colour here, when I wrote my dissertation, I decided that I wanted to write about my history. So I wrote about like my grandma, essentially. It was about like the first generation of female Pakistani migrants to West Yorkshire. And that in itself was really interesting to do, just because obviously there's not a lot of archival material about these women, migrant women. Who writes about them, who cares, right? So I had to conduct a lot of interviews, a lot of oral history, and it was just really interesting how that was dealt with by the faculty. And like, how can we trust this evidence? How can we trust these women? Oh, because like there is nothing else about them. But that was, for me at least, it feels like having done that and having kind of put their experiences down somewhere and validate them in the terms that these institutions set out, I've kind of made it worthwhile a little bit, and I feel like I've done something, you know, that was worthwhile doing. But also it's interesting because I don't think white people feel that burden. I don't think there is that same burden to kind of, you know, while you're here, do things, set things up for people, the next people coming. And I mean, this year, being a third year, I was very much aware of like the freshers coming in, and I, you know, looking out for faces that were not gonna fit in, and trying to just be like, I wanted to be the person that wasn't there for me, if you see what I mean. And I think that's a really nice thing to be able to do now. And I think probably the most important thing that I've learned being like here, and being a person of colour was, you know, beyond like any theoretical things or kind of any political things, was just in that moment of affirming someone else's experience or them affirming mine, was like learning that my life and my experiences are valid and that they are true. And I know that maybe doesn't sound that radical, but for me that was like massive. And it's kind of meant that I can go on to be, you know, critical of so many other types of truth, and it kind of doesn't mean as much when people dismiss what I have to say, because it's like, actually it's enough that it happened to me, that it is true. And I don't need, you know, my supervisor to agree. I don't need other people to agree. And I don't have to put my experiences up for debate, because they are true, and I know they are true now. So in that sense, like being a person of colour here, and because I think, you know, so like people of colour that are friends at home, yeah, love them, great. But I think because here we've all shared this kind of trauma, it creates these really, really important bonds with people, I feel. So in that sense, it's also been full of, you know, love and laughter, and helped me unlearn like a lot of hatred as well, and self-hatred and hatred of others and all that kind of thing. I think it's been really important to have this, and as traumatic as it has been, like you say, it's also been important in shaping who I am now and how I think of myself. So yeah.
So I just want to thank all of you for coming and sharing that with us, the whole audience. If anyone has anything they want to say or anything they want to ask, then please do so now, like, including you guys on the panel. Otherwise I can start. Yeah.
I think I just want to actually applaud the bravery, particularly women of colour in this environment, because I feel like coming here, there was something specifically about the kind of code switching thing, especially being from Leeds, sounding northern. I felt like I really wanted to feel normal, and spent a lot of time trying to sound normal and act normal and just be like acceptable. And it wasn't until kind of no chill sort of first years starring Othello and stuff like that, and just generally women were kind of telling me that to think about my race. It wasn't until that happened that I actually started thinking about it. So it wasn't really a question, but just like, thanks.
If anyone wants to,
Actually, I think it's been incredible to hear everyone's stories, and I mean, for me, I think all of our experiences are so valid and very moving, and have helped us grow. But I mean, sort of on the back of that, and this point about a shared trauma, but looking forward and how we can better ourselves as a group. Again, I want to bring it back to this point about Anglo-Ruskin students, because I think that's crucial in terms of the diversity that exists there and the isolation that Cambridge creates. Because, I mean, I don't know what people's thoughts are, but that whole experience in terms of being a person of colour in Cambridge, our boundaries are not just the university, at least for me. And my experience has been quite different, I think, partly because I didn't live in any college when I arrived. I'd been working for a year in my department, so had been quite removed. And I think thinking about these very privileged spaces also are occupied by others who are much less privileged than us. And that sort of is an important
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about that too, because I think one of the things that we learn when we experience oppression of any kind, I think, is that we also internalize those patterns. We internalize, as you said, the ways of like protecting us, and we start to believe that. But we can also start to act out the things that have been done to us in ways that we might not want to. It's not like, you know, it's not about judging if we're good or bad people, but we try to protect ourselves however we can. And sometimes the ways we learn to protect ourselves are ways that can damage other people or hurt other people. So like for me, like my class has been the only thing I have that I can try to use whenever I can. To just say like, wait a minute, you know, like I try to be something. So I can say that's the only thing I can have to protect myself from certain racism. And that is not necessarily uniting me, making me more human, making me connecting to other people. So I need to keep an eye on that. And I think that is an issue. It's an issue overall in the UK or England, in British society, the whole class thing. And then we all come here and then we kind of fit into it and we can just act out those things. So I think it is important to think about it. Like we might make it, you know, by linking into this without even realizing, we might be making a disservice to ourselves, you know, because we could join and be stronger and have more people to kind of be together with, and I'd be very much for supporting that. You know, it's not a judgment on like, oh, we are, you know, it's not another judgment on us, come on.
No.
But it is like, you know, what could we do better, differently, you know, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and then we'll go.
My name is Johanna. So I actually feel very strongly about that point as well, because I even noticed in the panel there isn't a representation of the voices of students of color who come from the United States, for example, or students of color who come directly from the Caribbean, and I identify in both groups. And I know that several undergraduates have personally contacted me from saying, you know, it's nice that Caribbean graduate students here, can we meet with you to talk to you, because there have been certain experiences that aren't actually kind of brought to the fore, because even within the population of students of color, we feel like there's less of us, you know, because there are more African students here. So that has been brought to my attention. And then, you know, a few of my friends who have also come from the States have similarly met and talked about how difficult it has been to navigate this space, given that you experience a very high degree of trauma and dissonance when you come from a place that is where you can actually speak out more about issues of race, and then you come to the UK and you have to be silent, or the fact that people assume that you're privileged because you're American in this space when you might not be privileged, or the fact that when race is discussed, it's race in the US as this separate type of beast that needs to be studied. So I have gone to one of the cluster research sessions, and we were studying race in America. And then when it was brought up that perhaps some of these issues are very much alive here in the UK, that was sort of suppressed. So sometimes you really feel that sense of discomfort with your own voice and where you should position yourself. So I would hope if this is done again, that there can be some representation from students that are coming from the United States and the Caribbean, because we are here.
I think.
Yeah, so Shaka and I are on the same wavelength here. She read my mind, but we also have had some conversations about this. So I feel like there is a triangulation, right, of different pieces of my identity, race, gender, and my nationality. So I was actually going to speak about the nationality point of being American. Because I do recognize that when people hear me speak, they're like, okay, she's American, and that there is some privilege that comes along with that. I do recognize that that my nationality, that the passport I hold, gives me access to certain spaces. I don't have to register with the police when I get here. So there are there are certainly privileges that come along with that, but I also feel sometimes that I don't fit, or there isn't a box for me. I mean, I checked Black Other for the first time in my life, and again, that is speaking from a point of privilege where other people have always been checking Other, right? So I recognize those things, but this inability to satisfy the question, where are you from? And being asked multiple times, even amongst other Black people, where are you from? Like, where are you really from? Because I can't point to a country because of, we all know the history of slavery, particularly in America. So even that question that I get from my Black peers, and then because I can't, again, satisfy that question, I don't feel like I fit in. I don't have a particular ethnic group or organization to go to, because I am used to having just a general Black student union in the States and at my undergraduate institution. So I think that is something that I've been trying to reconcile, how all of these pieces of my identity, not to mention class, which is a whole different conversation, or a part of this conversation, but I can talk for hours about that, but how my nationality, my race, my gender, and my class, like how can I navigate this space, and also stand in solidarity with my Black peers as we all try to, navigate, being Black or being people of color here at Cambridge.
Can I say something? I think Shaka and Aya, you've really struck a chord with me. I think there's many American students and Caribbean students, and that's why when we founded, though we founded the Black and Tabs with Nenda here and two other colleagues for research into Black alumni, I think that's one thing, and Shaka is also a member, that has come about. How do we get other Black students, say, who don't tick the boxes of I'm an African, I'm a Kenyan, or I'm this, into a space where they can also organize? And I hope that even in the future, Black students here or students of color can get into a space, whether it's the Black and Tabs or something, think of a space that they can actually come together, where everybody feels included. And also this, again, speaking to diversity and how class and coming here as a student of color, when we are so few, you all band together, even with people who you're so different. So in my excitement of, oh my God, I'm in Cambridge and it's so lonely, you band together with everybody. And then later you realize, oh my God, we are so different, either based on class especially, because even many Black and Black minority ethnic students who come here are also part of the class privilege that brought them here, So very few of us, like me coming from a working class background, come from my background. And you find even within that, the same students are discriminating you. So it's very, very, very hard. And it's quite something, even today, I still grapple around with, and many people, I think, from my kind of background also have to deal with them. I think what I said.
I think just being aware of time, we'll have to wrap up. But we are having, right after this, if you have a moment, we're having a wine reception in the OCR, which is also in Trinity. If you don't know what that is, we'll all be going there now. So if you do want to just have a chat with one of the panelists or myself or anyone else in the audience, then please come along and do that. But thank you so much for coming. I just want to quickly thank the people who have supported the Personal Histories Project, the organizations, the McDonald Institute, Thriplow, Kusu, who also supported us for this event, and also the TCSU Star JCR here. And thank you all for coming.